Welcome to Podcasting Smarter, the podcast for podcasters by podcasters. Podcasting Smarter is the official podcast from Podbean, featuring podcasting interviews, best practices, and helpful tips. We're here to give you the tools, resources, product updates, and news to help you get started podcasting and keep your podcast growing.
Welcome back, everyone, to Podcasting Smarter. Today's episode is from our January live event, 2024 Podcast Production Essentials, Unveil Pro Secrets with Dan Hughley of Focusrite, where we talked about podcast production, best practices, tips, and how to set yourself up for success, whether you're a beginner or a pro. I think that's what's one of the great things about podcasting is that we all just want you to make a great podcast as smooth and as simple as possible. The industry is really emerging. Right? Like we're living in the future. We keep talking about this. So what are some trends in podcast tech and the technology that podcasters are using to make and produce podcasts that you've found really exciting these days?
You know, you've mentioned AI, and it's in all aspects where it'll create your show notes. It'll create social posts for you, but there's also podcasts that are fully programmed by AI. Well, my favorite podcast is an AI driven podcast, which is really cool. It's called Dudesy, if you haven't heard of it, but Dudesy is a proprietary AI, and it follows these two guys' complete lives. So it has access to all of their personal information and creates the show around them. And every week it gets better. And it's a really hilarious podcast that I've learned so much about science and technology on a comedy podcast. But yeah, the AI is just going to make our lives easier. You know, like AutoGain, there's a little bit of AI in there. It's DSP, which is digital signal processors, which are inside of a lot of audio interfaces. Some have them, some don't. But yeah, that's basically an AI. It's a computer chip that's trained to help make your life easier. I just think there's going to be more and more of that coming, especially as AI is creating more AI. Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And in December, we had a great event here at Podbean with James Cridlin from Pod News.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, where he shared all about AI tools to help you produce and revitalize your podcast in the new year. So now that we're here in the new year, you can use them. If you email us at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com, we'll drop you a list of those tools. But I mean, even on the editing side, we're seeing some really cool things with Hindenburg and Descript, which are fantastic. I mean, Descript, you can select all the filler words and it will automatically delete them, right? And we have integrations with both of those editing platforms. So it's something where just know that, you don't have to download and re-upload. Once you've got the audio, there's so many cool things you can do.
Descript is so cool because it looks like a Word document and you just delete the words you don't want. It's kind of cool. And then Hindenburg, they have a really cool like noise cancellation or noise removal tool that I like to use. Some of the first episodes of the Focusrite Pro podcast that we did were on trade show floors. So imagine a convention center full of people just talking. It's just noise. And the AI tool there, it did a really good job of cutting out a lot of that background noise.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And Hindenburg also has an integration with Podbean, so you can literally directly publish from the back end into Podbean. And they have some really cool features of the platform. James actually goes into it. So we'll have the link to that event here in the show notes for today or in the description. So you can rewatch. He does a bit of a screen share and kind of shares the back end of Hindenburg, which is a fantastic technology. And you guys at Focusrite, you also have a bit of a collab with Hindenburg as well.
Yeah, I alluded to the easy button or the simple way to get Hindenburg. If you buy a Vocaster, you get a 6-month license to Hindenburg Pro. And then after that, you have Hindenburg Lite for life. So, it's a value add. It's free. It's something we take care of once you register your Vocaster. We make sure that you have that industry standard for podcasting recording software.
Yeah, absolutely. So Hindenburg's a really fantastic interface. And like you said, with Descript, we also have an integration with them and their text editing. So if you don't want to learn how to edit sound waves, you can literally select the text you want to cut, chop it out of there. Like literally like you're editing a Word document. It's fabulous. So there are so many tools out there that really enable you to streamline your process. For us at Podbean, we want you to be able to make a podcast fast and efficiently and without any kind of fatigue, because that can build up. And when you build something and when you start a podcast that you're really excited about, maintaining that excitement and momentum is paramount to keeping you continuing podcasting.
Yeah, I remember how excited I was every time I released an episode. Even, I didn't care if anyone listened. It was just so fun to put it out there, just because I was being creative and I was coming up with something from nothing, pretty much. So yeah, it was always really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for everyone out there, just know you want to make sure that you have your process as dialed in as possible. And
Yeah.
this whole launch month here at Podbean, let alone all of our events, to really just help you dial in your process so that it's as seamless as possible and you reduce that fatigue, because so many podcasters start out with that excitement, episode 1,
Mhm.
episode 5, episode 15. And, we talk to podcasters that are 500 episodes in. And the thing that makes the difference is really having a process and having it be as dialed in and as streamlined as possible. With the Vocaster and the audio interface that, you are really part of creating at Focusrite, which is so cool to help create a piece of hardware that people use for recording. Amazing.
Yeah.
It really, at Focusrite, you guys incorporate user feedback into
Mhm.
development of new products and features. So what is some of the most common feedback you hear from podcasters?
First, I pushed the company to make it. It was my idea to make it. The team did an incredible job. But this goes into your question of a lot of user feedback was used in designing a Vocaster, both from what I did out in the field, talking to people, but then with our product team, interviewing podcasters, speaking to them, surveying them, finding out what they needed, and what the pain points were that, some I didn't find, some they found, some they just came up with really great innovations to put into the box, which is cool. And I think the biggest thing is just how can you simplify my life? And that's really what we put into Vocaster, was simplifying the life of a podcaster. Our company's mission is to remove barriers to creativity. And beyond that, we don't want technology to get in the way of you using technology. So we want to uncomplicate your life. And I think that's what they did. And that's for the next steps of Vocaster. I don't really know what those are, and I couldn't speak to them anyway because they're a future roadmap thing. But we are still listening to podcasters, and we'll put that feedback in future products.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was some of that feedback? Like, what have
Sure.
been some common issues or roadblocks that podcasters have?
The gain setting issue. So we tackled that with putting auto gain.
Auto
Um,
gain. Yeah.
Yeah, auto gain, making themselves sound better. They don't know how to use EQ or compression. So we put 4 presets in there. So you can put on that magic wand button and you can select through 4 different presets to find how you sound the best. Removing of a gain booster. So you don't need to have the cloud lifter. So it's one piece of gear that you might not think to buy. So if you get an SM7B and an audio interface that doesn't have enough gain, you're going to think one of them's broken because it's not loud enough. So then you find out, oh, you have to buy a gain booster. And then you're like, that's another $100. I just spent all this money. We got rid of that. Saved you $100. Saved you the headache of even thinking of that. If you want to record directly to a camera, this is something I haven't mentioned yet. There's a camera output on Vocaster, so you can record directly to a camera. If you want to take a phone call the old school way, like using your telephone, like your iPhone or your Android or whatever, there's a Bluetooth connection on Vocaster, and it records every person onto their own individual channel in your recording software. So later on, you can mix that. And then there's a wired connection. So you can plug in a phone or an iPad or anything that has an 1/8-inch plug. And, that's another way to take phone calls, or you could trigger sounds, or flip it around the other way. You can record out to your apps. If you want to go live on TikTok, you're sending your computer audio. You can pull in royalty-free music from Spotify or Apple Music. You can pull in YouTube clips and reply to them in real time without having to, recable things. So we tried to think of podcasting from a lot of different angles and a lot of different types of shows, and spoke to the people about that. Like, something called a mix minus. I'm not going to get into what that is because you don't need to know what it is. It's in the box and done. It's not something you have to think about. And if you know what that is, you know what a headache it is to achieve. But we did it electronically. Don't even have to think about it in the box.
Yeah, I think that that's fantastic. And for everybody out there who's thinking, oh, there's all these things I have to know, there's some things you have to know. And it's important to get familiar with the gear that you have, like we've talked about. But it's also really important to know that you're not going to know everything, right? I mean, Dan, you went to school, like you went to college for audio engineering, right? Like it's 4 years of your life.
Yeah. There's a lot I don't know.
Yeah. So I think for everyone out there who feels like, oh, I have to know everything about audio. Nobody knows everything. That's number one. We're really here to help you just learn what you need to learn, the baseline, right? And give you some ideas and some tools for getting started. So Dan, wrapping up today, what advice would you give to podcasters or people who are thinking about starting a podcast, aspiring podcasters, especially here for our launch month? who are just starting out and want to create high quality content?
So something I have written on my board over here is keep it simple. I'm a person who stacks things on top of things, and there's just too much going on. And I always have to remind myself to go back to basics and make sure that I'm doing the minimum possible to get that sound and get that good audio quality. And usually that's enough. It's when I overcomplicate things that things start sounding funky or weird, or if I try something that someone tells me to do, it might not be the best for me. So really keep it simple, get the best gear that you can afford, but also you don't have to go overboard on it. You don't have to get a $500-$600 audio interface. You can stay in the under $200 price range and you'll get something great. Microphones, that's a place you might want to spend a little bit more money because the microphones can be a bit more expensive. I think an SM7B is around $400. But there are plenty of options under that. One of my favorites that I didn't mention earlier is a Hughley PR40. I think those come in like right around $300. So they're a little bit cheaper, maybe $250. So yeah, just keep it simple, back to basics, and just tell your story. I want to hear it. So just tell it, please.
Oh, I love that. I think that that's very true. And there's also microphones that are like $100, right? They may not be,
yeah, of course.
It's something where don't feel like because you don't have the cash to shell out for like a recommended microphone, because $400 is
that's a lot.
It's a lot, right? But you can always upgrade. And this is what we see with podcasters all the time. The podcasters that are, successful year after year, that are monetizing and living off their podcast, they all started somewhere,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so it's important to know that wherever you are starting is perfect.
Yep, exactly.
Yep. And you'll improve just by doing it.
Yep, it's your journey. Sorry to on the microphone thing. Yeah, the Shure SM58 is probably the most popular mic in the world. Anytime you go to see a concert, that's the mic everybody on stage is using. It's about $100. And it has some of the same components as the SM7B. It's just a different form factor.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dan, it's just been such a pleasure. I mean, for everybody out there, like I mentioned, if you have questions, you can always reach out to us at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com. And if you have questions for Dan, email us there and we'll forward them. We'll forward them to Dan. And Dan, thanks so much for being part of our launch month. We had John last week. So yeah, it's been such a pleasure. Next week, we have the Dear Alice folks as well, talking about how they grew and monetized their podcast, which is a phenomenal podcast all about interior design. So the whole purpose of Launch Month is really to help give you the tools and the inspiration and the insight to get your podcast up and running, right? We have Podbean Academy, which really helps you break down any specific aspect of podcasting, whether it's publishing your podcast, learning how to monetize, all sorts. We've got Dan here talking all about production, which has just been such a treat, Dan. Thank you. And then we're talking to the Dear Alice folks who've really lived it and have built their podcast with Alice Lane Home Design. So we're just so excited that you've joined us here for Launch Month. And of course, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com. You can replay the full event live stream on Podbean's YouTube channel. And we've got highlights on today's episode and a couple other upcoming episodes. Podcasting Smarter. Happy podcasting, everybody. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Norma Jean.
Thanks for joining us for this replay of our live event episode. If you have any questions about podcasting and want to get in touch with the Podbean team, reach out to us at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com. Happy podcasting.